Tonight, newly released autopsy results are raising more questions about how Nolan Wells died. An independent exam commissioned by his family's legal team classified the cause and manner of death for the 18-year-old as undetermined pending investigation.
He's saying based on the examination of the body, he cannot rule out foul play. That is significant.
The forensic pathologist wrote there were no fractures, cuts, or bruises on Nolan's body, but noted red discoloration was found on the back of his head and needs more investigation. The autopsy was performed 4 days after his body was found. The pathologist also writing there were missing parts of the neck.
Have you or he asked anyone for access to those things?
Hopefully that the medical examiner will allow him to come and examine the throat, also to talk about observations that they had, and so they could share information.
There is a piece of Nolan Wells that his family has never gotten back. When his body was flown to Washington for a second examination, the pathologist who opened him found that the structures of his throat were gone. The trachea, the laryngeal cartilage, the thyroid horn, the hyoid bone, the small horseshoe of bone in the neck that fractures under pressure, and almost nowhere else. All of it retained in Mississippi during the first autopsy, and never sent. Dr. Roger Mitchell has run a city's medical examiner office. He is president of the National Medical Association. He has read many bodies. He could not read this one. Without the neck, he wrote, he could not rule out an injury to it. Then he turned the boy over, 12 inches by 8, across the back of the skull, deep red, no cut in the skin above it, no crack in the bone beneath it. Cause, he wrote, unclear. Officials had already said there were no signs of foul play. Mitchell wrote that he could not rule it out. One boy, two conclusions. Both cannot be true. There is a document that could end this. The state's own autopsy, done first, in Mississippi, by the pathologist who still has his throat. It has been finished for weeks. It is sealed. Not from reporters, from his mother. Christine Wansley raised him. She fed him the night before he left. She is the administrator of his estate, and she is the last person in this story who will learn how her child died. A grand jury reads it first. She waits. 4 weeks now, 3 federal arrests, and not one of them for Nolan. Nobody charged. Nobody named. Nobody cleared. 18 years old. 4 days from football camp. 10 miles from home. This episode covers a teenager's death and the 2 examinations of his body. Nothing here is graphic, but there are forensic details and threats made against witnesses that some viewers will find hard. Every claim comes from a filing, an official statement, or an on-record interview. Where accounts conflict, we show you both and say plainly what is still unproven. Welcome to the Crime Executioner, where the paperwork comes first and the theories come last. Subscribe if you want this case built from documents, not rumors. Tell us in the comments what you think is in that sealed report. Let's begin. Nolan Xavier Wells was born on the 19th of August 2007, and he never lived anywhere but Ocean Springs, Mississippi. He was raised Catholic and baptized as a child at St. Joseph Catholic Church in Moss Point. When he died, he was 6 weeks short of his 19th birthday. He graduated from Ocean Springs High School with the class of 2025. He played 3 sports there, football and basketball and baseball, and when he was not on a field, he was often behind a camera, working with GTV, the school's media program. On the football field, he was a wide receiver, and he was good enough at it to be named All-Region twice. That earned him a scholarship. He signed with Southwest Mississippi Community College in Summit, a 3-hour drive north of the coast, where the roster listed him at 6'1" and 185 pounds. He was majoring in general business. He had 5 siblings. The people who coached him and played beside him have all said versions of the same thing, and they said it publicly, before the cameras arrived. His head coach at Ocean Springs, Jake Bramlett, said Nolan carried himself with humility, treated people with respect, worked hard, and led by example. He said his character spoke louder than his accomplishments. Brody Sands, a linebacker who came up behind him, said Nolan was one of the first people he met playing varsity, and that Nolan welcomed the younger players with open arms. Weeks before he died, Nolan had been giving Sands advice about what to expect from his own first junior college season. Elmore Wansley, speaking on national television after it was over, described him as a silent leader. Not a big talker, more action than words. The kind of young man his teammates looked to without him ever asking them to. On the 3rd of July, Nolan had dinner with his family, then left to spend the night with friends ahead of the holiday. The next morning, they went out to Horn Island. Horn Island sits roughly 10 miles off the Mississippi Gulf Coast. It is federally protected, which means no shelters, no restrooms, no facilities of any kind. There is no cell service on it. The only way to reach it is on a private boat, and the only way to leave it is the same. The currents in the water around it are known to be dangerous. Ocean Springs, the town Nolan grew up in, is roughly 79% white according to the most recent census. In the group of friends he traveled out with that morning, he was the only black teenager. They reached the island in the late morning. At first it was manageable, just their circle and a handful of others spread along the sand. It did not stay that way. Warren Hudson, one of the friends who made the trip, later described the build to podcast host Brandon Tatum. 1 minute it was their group. Then there were 50 people around them. Then it kept going. Hudson said Nolan visited with a group of more than 20 people across 3 boats, and that by the height of the day, as many as 2,000 people had come out to the island to celebrate the 4th. The last point in the day that everyone agrees on is around 3 in the afternoon. Ashley Cole is a chancery judge in Jackson County and Warren Hudson's stepmother. Writing publicly in the days after, she said her son last saw Nolan at about 3 o'clock, and that Nolan told him he would get a ride back to the mainland later with another group of friends. She said Warren was interviewed by the Jackson County Sheriff's Department and cooperated fully. She said the group left the island around 4:30 when the boat began taking on water and they had a problem with the bilge pump. That last part is the piece. Almost every account of this case has repeated without checking, and there is a recording of it. The call did not go to the Coast Guard. It went to Sea-Tow, a private boat towing company. The Mississippi Department of Marine Resources released the audio, obtained through a records request. On it, someone aboard the boat tells the dispatcher that the bilge pump has stopped working, that they are sinking, and asks whether the company can please come. Then the situation changes. Later in the same recording, the dispatcher states that the people on the boat had resolved the issue and do not need any help right now. Whatever was wrong with that boat, the people on it told a dispatcher they had handled it. The boat left the island at roughly 4:30 in the afternoon. Nolan Wells was not on it. CBS News later obtained GPS records from the Department of Marine Resources tracking that vessel's movements after it departed. The data confirms when the boat left and where it went. It cannot confirm a single thing about who was standing on its deck or who was still on the sand behind it, watching it go. There are 2 accounts of why Nolan Wells stayed on that island. They come from people who were both there. They do not fit together. The first account comes from his friends, and they have given it consistently, in public, with their names attached. Trayston Shepard is 20. He knew Nolan from their freshman year at Ocean Springs High School, and they bonded through sports. He sat down with ABC News and Good Morning America and said that Nolan met a young woman on the island that afternoon, that he liked her, and that when the boat was leaving he chose to stay behind with her. Shepard also addressed a piece of video that had been spreading online, footage some people claimed showed a confrontation involving Nolan. He said the voice on that recording is his own, not Nolan's. The friends said the same thing to law enforcement at the time. A Marine Patrol report from the Mississippi Department of Marine Resources records several of the friends who traveled with Wells telling deputies that when they left, he was in the company of an unknown female, and that he chose to remain on the island. Sheriff John Ledbetter of Jackson County put it plainly to the Associated Press. From the people his investigators had talked to, it sounded like Nolan chose to stay, with the assumption that he was going to ride back to the mainland with someone else. That is one version. Here is the other. The young woman has never spoken publicly about any of this. She faces no allegations. She was on the island with a completely different group of friends. Her 23-year-old sister spoke to the Daily Mail and gave an account that runs directly against the first one. According to her sister, when the conversation ended, her understanding was that Nolan was getting on the boat he had arrived on. She assumed that the friends telling him it was time to go would not have left him there. Other reporting indicates the 2 of them spoke only briefly. She left the island separately, taken home by her brother and his fiancée. Her family says they have given every answer they can, both to investigators and to Nolan's family directly. Ben Crump reduced it to a single problem. One side says Nolan was going to get back on the boat with the boys. The other side says Nolan told them he was staying with the girl. Somebody, Crump said, must not be telling the truth. That is the fork this entire case turns on, and everything that follows runs down one branch or the other. We are going to follow both. If that is the version of this story you want, subscribe now, because the rest of this episode does not pick a side, it tests them. The call came around 11 at night. It was not from Nolan. It was from one of his friends, telling his family that he had not come back. Christine Wansley reported her son missing. Warren Hudson also called the Coast Guard that night, something the family later confirmed publicly. By then, Nolan had been unaccounted for since the middle of the afternoon. Christine started working through everyone she could reach. Tashema Hands, the mother of Nolan's friend Javon Williams, joined the effort and began making her own calls. Nobody in that circle had seen him since the island, so the question changed. It stopped being "Where is Nolan?" and became "Where is his phone?" Tashema Hands tracked it using Snapchat to a house where a lot of people were gathered. She later described what happened to CNN's Laura Coates. She asked for the phone. It took roughly 15 minutes before someone found it and handed it over. She got it back. And that is when the next question started. Christine went through her son's phone, and what struck her was what was not on it. There were no Snapchat photos and no videos from the day he spent on that island. Nothing. She told Coates that it seemed too clean. She knew her child. If he had a phone out constantly at home, he was going to have it out when he was doing things with his friends. That there was nothing there at all was, in her words, really hard to believe. What is not in dispute is what the family did next. Through Jackson County Chancery Court, Nolan's parents subpoenaed 5 companies for records tied to his accounts. Life 360, Snapchat, Meta, TikTok, WhatsApp. They filed those subpoenas because they believe messages may have been deleted from their son's phone. That is not a theory circulating online. That is a filing in a Mississippi courthouse, made by a mother who is also the administrator of her son's estate, and it is still open. At 26 minutes past noon on July 5th, Coast Guard Sector Mobile received a request for assistance from the Jackson County Sheriff's Department, a missing person in the vicinity of Horn Island. 5 minutes later, at 12:31, the sheriff's office put out a public release. 18-year-old black male, approximately 6'1", 180 pounds. Last seen on Horn Island on Saturday, July 4th, wearing blue swim trunks, no shirt, and sunglasses. The Coast Guard issued an urgent marine information broadcast and put a helicopter in the air. That afternoon, the Mississippi Department of Marine Resources launched 2 drone flights to survey the western side of the island. Neither one lasted. The heat that day was severe enough that the drone batteries swelled and the flights had to be cut short. Nothing was found. Christine Wansley was not waiting on official channels alone. She reached out directly to the United Cajun Navy, a volunteer search and rescue nonprofit based in Louisiana, and they joined the effort. The search would run more than 40 hours. There is one line in the record from that evening that has never been explained. On July 5th, a Department of Marine Resources official sent an email to Coast Guard authorities requesting search and rescue data related to Nolan. In it, the official relayed a physical description of the teenager and wrote that his alcohol intake had been heavy. No toxicology report existed at that point. None has been released since. Reporting by CNN notes that it is unclear how Marine Resources officials knew he had been drinking or where that assessment came from. It sits in the record, unattributed, from the second day of the search. On the morning of July 6th, a National Park Service ranger walking the northwest tip of Horn Island found Nolan in the water off the shoreline. Jackson County Coroner Bruce Lynn Jr. responded. His initial assessment found no immediately obvious signs of trauma. Given where the body was found and the circumstances around it, Lind requested a full autopsy from the Mississippi State Medical Examiner's Office anyway, to determine at a deeper level whether anything had been missed. Identification was confirmed the following day through dental records. The search was over. Everything else was about to begin. The examination took place on July 7th at the Mississippi State Medical Examiner's Office Coast Lab, one day after he was found. At the end of July, officials confirmed that autopsy was complete. The report was not released. It has not been released since. It is worth understanding why, because the reason is procedural rather than sinister. The Jackson County District Attorney's Office has said the case will be presented to a grand jury once the sheriff's investigation is finished, and that the evidence will stay out of public view until the grand jury sees it first. Prosecutors say that protects the integrity of the investigation. The office has also been explicit about something people online keep getting wrong. Convening a grand jury does not mean investigators suspect criminality. In Jackson County, it is standard procedure for most unnatural or suspicious deaths. That is the mechanism. Here is what it costs. On July 15th, Nolan's parents met District Attorney Angel Myers McElrath. It was the first meeting between the family and the prosecutor since his body was recovered. Ben Crump described it afterward as respectful and said both sides were candid. McElrath walked them through the legal process that would follow. They left that meeting without a cause of death. Weeks later, they still do not have one. Meanwhile, the sheriff's investigation kept moving. On July 6th, the day the body was found, Sheriff John Ledbetter told CNN his detectives were interviewing people who had first-hand interactions with Nolan on the day he went missing, and that no foul play had been identified at that time. Since then, he has confirmed that the FBI is assisting with the examination of digital evidence collected in the case, and that the 3 friends who traveled out on the boat with Nolan have been interviewed in depth. Crump has not spoken to those young men at all. He has said publicly that he cannot, because they have obtained legal representation. There is one more thing the state did in that first examination, and it is not unusual in itself. When a pathologist is evaluating a possible drowning, the lungs are often retained, because their condition helps establish whether water entered the airway. When there is any question about pressure or injury to the neck, the structures of the throat are sometimes retained for the same reason. Both were kept in Mississippi. That is standard practice. It is also the reason that the second examination of Nolan Wells, conducted nearly 1,000 miles away, would arrive at the answer it did. On July 10th, Nolan's parents stood at the National Action Network headquarters in New York alongside Ben Crump and Reverend Al Sharpton. Their position was simple. What they were being told about their son was not adding up, and they wanted an answer from someone they had chosen themselves. Colin Kaepernick funded the second examination. It was conducted in Washington, D.C., by Dr. Roger A. Mitchell, Jr., the former chief medical examiner for the District of Columbia and the current president of the National Medical Association. 12 days later, at the 117th NOPS National Convention in Chicago, Crump read the findings aloud, with Nolan's parents beside him. Cause of death, undetermined. Manner of death, undetermined. Pending investigation. The report set out why. The body had undergone marked decompositional changes by the time it reached Washington, which made it difficult to assess whether there were bruises or abrasions on the skin. Mitchell was unable to examine the airway and lungs for the presence of water, which is one of the central indicators in any suspected drowning. He was unable to examine the stomach contents. Additional dissections were performed, and on those he identified no fractures and no deep tissue injuries, and he did not receive the internal structures of the neck. Because of that, he wrote, he could not rule out injury to the neck as a contributor to or a cause of death. Then the sentence that changed the shape of the case. Reading from the report, Crump said that this pathologist cannot rule out if any intervening, non-accidental factors contributed to or caused the death of Nolan Wells. Based on examination of the body, Crump said, he cannot rule out foul play. There is a professional counterpoint to all of this, and it deserves to be heard. Dr. Priya Banerjee, a board-certified forensic pathologist with no connection to this case, told NBC News that second autopsies carry an inherent limitation. The body is never received intact, never in the state an unexamined body would be in. She also said, it is not unusual for an independent examiner to lack access to the primary examiner's findings, because state laws restrict what can be released while a case is active. Mitchell has since asked for access to the tissue that was retained. Crump has called for him to be included when the grand jury hears the death investigation. NACSB President Derek Johnson has stated publicly that he does not believe this death was accidental. The organization passed a resolution urging local, state, and federal authorities, including the Department of Justice, to conduct a transparent investigation. Strip away the noise and look at what investigators are actually working with. Roughly 60 witnesses interviewed. GPS records tracking a vessel. Surveillance footage from the boat launch on the morning of the 4th. Video shot on the island itself, some of it verified by news organizations as authentic to that day. The sea tow recording. And digital evidence being examined with FBI assistance. That is a substantial evidence base. It is also, so far, not enough. Into that gap came something that spread faster than any of it. An independent audio engineer released an enhanced version of the sea tow call, and a great many people heard in it what sounded like proof of something terrible. Then the professionals looked at it. A forensic audio expert appearing on News Nation's Jesse Weber Live noted that the enhanced file ran at least 20 seconds longer than the original recording, and expressed doubts about it on that basis alone. A forensic audio company compared the transcriptions of both files and could not corroborate the claims being made about the enhanced version. The engineer who produced it has said the public should treat it as a listening reference and not the only interpretation. Investigators have not commented on it. Crump's team has separately retained audio engineering experts of their own to review the CTO call in its entirety, which is the correct way to do this. It was not the only false document in circulation. Mississippi Commissioner of Public Safety Sean Tyndall publicly stated that a toxicology report circulating on social media was fraudulent and urged people to stop spreading it. An AI-generated video misrepresenting Christine Wansley also circulated widely. She debunked it herself. On the substance, two serious reads exist. Former FBI agent Jennifer Coffindaffer reviewed what is publicly available, the footage, the witness accounts, the Coast Guard communications, and the rip current conditions in that water. Her conclusion was that when you add it together, what we can see points toward an accident. Against that, an independent analytical review of photographs, video, GPS coordinates, and witness accounts concluded that the evidence still leaves a material gap in the timeline between Nolan's last independently corroborated sighting and his disappearance. The family's own investigation, led by attorney Eric Hertz, is now working with oceanic engineering experts on one specific question: how a body came to rest so close to the place where he was last seen alive, and Sheriff Ledbetter's request is still open. Anyone who was on Horn Island on July 4th with original, unedited photos or video is asked to come forward. The footage that answers this is very likely sitting in someone's camera roll right now. When it surfaces, we will cover it the same way we have covered everything else, from the documents up. Subscribe so you get that version first. They buried him on July 20th at Center Point Church in Ocean Springs. Tyler Perry paid for the funeral. Al Sharpton spoke there and said the most careful thing anyone connected to this case has said out loud. They cannot say it was racist. They cannot say it was not racist. So let nobody judge either way until all the evidence is in. The money arrived faster than the answers. The reward for information leading to an arrest and conviction now stands at $225,000. Built from pledges by Sharpton, Tyler Perry, Colin Kaepernick, and former NFL receiver Terrell Owens. And then Benjamin Hudson added $50,000 of his own. Benjamin Hudson is Warren Hudson's father. The father of the young man the internet has spent a month accusing is helping pay for information that could lead to an arrest. He said his family does not know what happened. He said they have been completely transparent from the beginning, because they want to know too. That is the part of this story people are not sitting with. The pressure has landed on everybody. Christine Wansley has reported hostile phone calls, harassing mail, and coordinated negative reviews left on her professional page. Judge Ashley Cole deactivated her Facebook account after photographs of her minor children began circulating online. She wrote that she fears for her children's safety and stated that nobody in her family is trying to impede law enforcement or hamper anyone's quest for answers. 3 people have now been charged federally. Not one of them for the death of Nolan Wells. Joseph Alfredo Vasquez Dumarce of Sacramento, California, charged over threatening messages sent to Judge Cole. Michelle Francine Edwards of Cincinnati, Ohio, charged over bomb threats phoned into the George County Chancery Clerk's office and the Jackson County Sheriff's Office on the same day. Edward James Porter of Berwyn, Illinois, charged over threats made to 2 witnesses. Attorney Russ Latino has said those threats targeted family members of Bart Edmiston Jr. Edmiston is 21, a former teammate of Nolan's, who knew him and who provided aid to the group's boat that day. He was identified through online speculation and began receiving death threats. Through his attorney, he has issued cease and desist and evidence preservation letters. His family has denied any involvement, said he cooperated fully with investigators, and warned that defamation lawsuits may follow. Benjamin Hudson also launched a fundraiser on GiveSendGo, naming Warren Hudson, Jax Patalo, and Morgan Seymour as young men who have been inundated with death threats and defamation, and who have been blamed online and in the media for having a hand in Nolan's death. The money is going to the Taylor and Cox law firm in Mississippi to defend against a wrongful death action the family expects and to pursue defamation claims of their own. It has passed $130,000. So both sides are now lawyered, funded, and preparing to sue each other in a case where nobody has been charged with anything. Through all of it, one voice has stayed exactly where it started. Javon Williams has known Nolan longer than almost anyone in this story. He was supposed to be on the same boat that morning, but it filled up before he could get on, so he found another ride and reached the island separately. He saw Nolan out there. He has said that as soon as they got out there, Nolan told him that he loved him. Williams told CNN he has never known Nolan to stay back and watch his friends leave. If he rode with you, he was coming back with you. That is how he had been, every single time. Williams was not standing there when that boat pulled away. He did not hear what was said in those last minutes. He is not offering an eyewitness account, and he has never pretended to. What he is offering is 19 years of watching one person behave one way, and the plain statement that this does not look like him. That is not proof. It is also not nothing. Here is where it actually stands. No arrests. No suspects named. Nobody publicly cleared either. A state autopsy that is finished and sealed. A grand jury that has not yet convened. A pathologist in Washington still waiting on the tissue that would let him finish his own work. Subpoenas open in a Mississippi Chancery Court. Audio experts on both sides reviewing the same recording. A sheriff still asking for footage. $225,000 sitting on the table for anyone who can say what happened. And a mother in Ocean Springs who still does not know how her son died. Everything in this case has a document except the one thing that matters. Somebody knows what happened in the hours after that boat turned toward the mainland, on an island with hundreds of people on it, on a holiday, with phones in every hand. Somebody saw something. Until one of them speaks, or until that report is unsealed, this stays exactly where it is, open. When it moves, we will be here, and we will cover it the same way we covered this. Documents first, theories last. If this case matters to you, subscribe and turn on notifications so you are not the last to hear. And tell us in the comments which unanswered question you want followed next, because there are more of them in this story than there are answers.